What do you do when your own child becomes your loneliness? There is a kind of silence heavier than shouting. It's the kind that invades the house when children grow up and disappear. They haven't vanished from the world, but they've vanished from your life. You know where they are, but you no longer know where the love that once felt so certain has gone. Maybe you're living through this now. A son who doesn't call, a daughter who responds with coldness, and you, without even realizing it, start to wonder if you failed, if you did something wrong, if you deserve this distance. Maybe you've started to live in a constant state of doubt, as if every gesture needs approval, even when there's no one left to approve it. It's like being surrounded by invisible walls where what keeps you imprisoned isn't chains, but guilt, a subtle guilt that no one directly imposes, yet you carry it in your chest as if it were an unpayable debt. You begin to think that maybe you deserve this loneliness, that maybe you should have done things differently, that maybe you failed as a parent, and it's in that maybe that so many of us become emotionally exhausted. Today, I want to talk to you about that, about the pain of being ignored by a child, about the exhaustion of trying to maintain a bond that only hurts, about the fear of aging while feeling invisible, and most of all, about how it's possible to break that cycle without losing love but gaining respect. We'll talk calmly, clearly, and with deep compassion. This video is for you, who have cried in secret, ashamed to admit you're afraid to distance yourself from the one who hurts you most. It's for you, who, even completely worn out, still ask, "Am I overreacting?" No, you are not overreacting, and more importantly, this is not your fault. In the next few minutes, we'll explore 3 powerful steps to help you understand what's happening, why you are not to blame, and how to begin reclaiming your emotional dignity. Step by step, you'll see that there is a way to rebuild your life, even if your child never changes. And that path begins inside you, with clarity, emotional boundaries, and above all, self-respect. Maybe for the first time in a long while, you'll feel understood. And perhaps you'll begin to reconnect with who you were before becoming someone who just waits for a call that never comes. Now that you've made it this far, take a deep breath. There's no rush. This is one of those moments when the soul begins to reorganize itself from within. We're going to divide this video into 3 major steps. Each one is designed to reach deep inside you, not with ready-made formulas, but with emotional clarity, real stories, and simple practices that can transform how you see and protect yourself. These steps aren't magical, but they are profound. They were shaped by the pain many parents have lived through. They recognize your exhaustion, your silent guilt, and the hope that still flickers, however faint, inside your chest. The first step will guide us to recognize the invisible pain, the kind that doesn't bleed on the outside but aches deeply on the inside. The pain of being ignored, the pain of being forgotten, the pain of having done so much, and yet feeling as if it was never enough. Then we'll talk about emotional conformity, a kind of prison many parents quietly accept, believing that it's better to keep a fragile bond than to risk losing everything. But is that truly a bond, or is it just fear? And finally, we'll explore how to rebuild who you are without needing your child to change. Because yes, it is possible to redefine your identity, create new emotional ties, and live a secure emotional life in old age, even after so much heartache. These 3 steps don't require physical strength. They require emotional courage, the courage to look inward, the courage to respect yourself, the courage to say, "I deserve more than this." Are you ready to walk this path with me? Then let's begin. Because every step you take back toward yourself is a step back home, to your inner home, where your dignity, your worth, and your peace live. Have you ever felt like you were being punished? With silence, not with harsh words, not with direct aggression, but with absence, with neglect, with being forgotten. Many parents live this every day. Children who don't call, who ignore messages, who only show up when they need something. And even then, they make it seem like you're the one overreacting. This kind of absence is not simple neglect. It's emotional punishment, and it runs deep. Because when your own child chooses silence as a way of dealing with you, they are using time, distance, and doubt as weapons. They know, even if unconsciously, that silence hurts you, and it does. Since ancient times, the greatest human fear has been abandonment. It's a primal fear, and when a child goes silent for days, weeks, months, that silence triggers something ancient inside you. Memories of when being left behind meant not surviving. You're not overreacting by feeling hurt. You're simply reacting like any human being would in the face of emotional rejection. But many parents, instead of recognizing this subtle abuse, assume the blame. They think, "I must have done something wrong," and that's when the cycle begins to repeat. because you start trying to win back someone who doesn't even acknowledge your pain. Maybe it's time to change that, to stop begging for emotional crumbs, to stop thinking the problem is only yours. And a powerful first step is writing. Write what you feel, in a notebook just for you, a silent journal, where you can pour everything that hurts, uncensored, not for your child to read, but for you to see yourself, so that you can finally give a name to what is quietly eating away at you. You might start like this. Today, once again, he didn't call, and that made me feel like I don't matter. That's not weakness. That's courage. That's reconnecting with your own truth. A woman once told me, I went 6 months without a single call. At first, I cried every day. Later, I realized the real emptiness wasn't just his absence. It was what I believed about myself because of it. And that phrase stuck with me, because that's exactly it. The silence of another only hurts so much because it echoes within the guilt you already carry. And that guilt is almost always invisible. It hides under a sense of responsibility. You tell yourself maybe you're being too harsh, maybe your child is busy, maybe he has problems. And of course, that might be true. But when silence repeats itself, when distance becomes routine, when disrespect becomes the new normal, something needs to be named. Naming is the first step in reclaiming your emotional dignity. Name what you feel. Write it down. Acknowledge it. Not to confront your child, but to finally, after so long, truly hear yourself. Because as long as you don't admit that it hurts, you'll keep trying to heal a wound with silence. And silence doesn't heal. Silence, when imposed, wounds. And you don't have to keep accepting it as if it's normal, because it's not. That's not care. It's control. That's not love. It's punishment. That's not protection. It's abandonment dressed as maturity. There is a kind of pain that doesn't start with someone else's silence but inside your own mind. It's that feeling that everything that's happening might be your fault. Even when you've done nothing wrong, you begin to carry an emotional responsibility that doesn't belong to you, and that is devastating. Many parents grow old wondering where they went wrong, and that question, which could be an invitation to gentle reflection, becomes an internal cry of self-blame. Was I too absent? Did I spoil them too much? Did I fail as a role model? These voices don't come from your child. They come from within, and they are fed by years of emotional giving without recognition. There's a very cruel myth among elderly parents that a good parent is the one who endures everything in silence. This belief turns love into submission, respect into silence, and connection into captivity. When you accept this role of martyr, you start to believe you deserve every act of coldness, every absence, every harsh word, as if it were a fair punishment. But this isn't justice. This is distorted guilt. It's the superego, as Freud described, acting as a relentless judge inside you. It demands perfection, knowing full well that perfection doesn't exist. It accuses you, even without proof. It says you should have been stronger, or softer, or more present. And no matter what you did, it always feels like it wasn't enough. When left unrecognized, this guilt leads to isolation. You go quiet. You don't talk about how you feel. You don't ask for help. You don't share your pain because you feel ashamed. Ashamed to admit you raised children who now hurt you. Ashamed to feel weak. Ashamed for not having the strength to walk away. And that silence, that shame, places you in a deep emotional loneliness. It's a double punishment. You suffer from your child's absence, and you still blame yourself for not knowing how to deal with it. But there's a way to begin breaking this cycle. It starts with a simple but powerful gesture, rewriting your guilt narrative, not through denial, but through truth, in 3 steps. First, write down the facts without judgment. My son has ignored me for months. When I speak, he responds coldly. I don't know why. Just describe. Second, write what you feel. This hurts. I feel rejected. I feel small. I feel confused. Don't filter. Just feel. Third, write what you would say to a friend if they were going through the same thing. You did the best you could. You don't deserve to be treated this way. You are still worthy of love. Then, read those words as if they were meant for you, because they are. A mother once told me, for years I thought the problem was me, that I had failed as a mother, until the day I realized my son looked at me like a mirror, and all I could see in that reflection was guilt. That image is strong, but also liberating, because it shows that what hurts most isn't always what someone does, but what you believe about yourself because of what they do. You are not to blame for not being loved the way you deserve. You didn't fail for expecting respect. You are not alone in this pain, but it takes courage to see yourself differently, to stop judging yourself as guilty, and start seeing yourself as someone who, despite everything, still deserves tenderness, to be heard, and loving presence, even if, for now, that presence has to be your own. There is a kind of suffering that doesn't scream. It settles, it adjusts, it pretends everything is fine, and slowly it becomes the emotional routine of many parents who accept crumbs of affection as if that's all they deserve. This is emotional conformity, the quiet but powerful idea that some contact is better than none, that at least he still shows up for Christmas, that it's better to say nothing than to make it worse. This logic may seem reasonable, but it's deeply dangerous, because it teaches the heart to accept less than it needs, less than it deserves, less than what's emotionally healthy. Children who offer scraps of presence, cold gestures disguised as care, and small tokens in between long periods of neglect are often not being loving. They are maintaining control, because when you accept little, you get used to asking for nothing, and those who manipulate know this. This kind of relationship is like an emotional rope tied too tightly. You don't cut it out of fear of pain, but it's been choking you for a long time. Many parents don't realize that this seemingly peaceful relationship is actually a prison. There are no fights, but there's also no real connection. There's no visible aggression, but there's also no consistent affection. Only a silence with a set date. The silence between one formal visit and the next. The silence between coldness and the next favor they'll ask for. And then comes the paralyzing belief, better to keep this little than risk losing everything. But what exactly would you be losing? A presence that's already absent? Affection that no longer nurtures you? A call that doesn't even ask how you're doing? Conformity is the narcissist's most efficient trap, because it doesn't provoke confrontation. It numbs. It tells you it's normal not to be heard. It calls love what is really fear of being alone. But the loneliness you fear is already here, just disguised as a relationship. It is possible to break this cycle without conflict, without shouting, without dramatic breakups, through what I call the silent boundary. The silent boundary is an internal decision. It doesn't need to be announced or discussed. It begins when you choose not to expose yourself to contempt anymore, when you stop waiting for what never comes, when you decide to care for yourself without depending on the affection the other refuses to give. A woman once told me, "At 75, I discovered I didn't have to beg for presents anymore. I started talking more with myself, listening to myself, treating myself with kindness. And when he called after 2 months, I realized I was no longer waiting." That's liberating, not because the child changed, but because she changed the way she related to his absence. She no longer accepted so little as if it were everything. She understood that peace is not conforming to lack, it's protecting yourself from it. You have that right. The right not to accept less than a worthy love. The right to stop pretending everything is okay. The right to no longer justify someone else's neglect. The right to quietly take the first step toward your own emotional freedom. And often that first step is not away from your child. It's toward yourself, where your clarity lives, where your strength lives, where the love you always gave, and also deserve to receive, lives. There's a phrase many mothers repeat, even with tears in their eyes, "But he's my son." That phrase, spoken in pain, tries to justify the unjustifiable. It reveals a bond that has stopped being affection and has become emotional imprisonment. Love, when it's true, liberates. It embraces. It respects. But when it becomes a tool of control, it twists. It starts being used as blackmail, as a debt, as a way to keep you tied to someone who no longer sees you as a person, but only as a role. In psychoanalysis, we talk about something very deep: emotional dependency built from emotional transference. In simple terms, the role your child occupies in your mind is so immense that you can no longer see yourself outside of that relationship, even when it hurts. And that hurt often comes with confusion, because he also knows how to show affection. Sometimes he even gives compliments, says he loves you, hugs you. But notice, how often does that affection come right after a criticism, a demand, a subtle attack? It's a pattern. First he puts you down, then he comforts you. First he accuses, then he praises. It's as if he knocks you to the ground, and then offers a hand to lift you up. But that's not care, it's manipulation, because it leads you to confuse the relief of a break with genuine love. Neuroscience explains it. Our brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, even in abusive relationships. That's why you feel longing. That's why you feel guilty when you try to walk away. That's why the idea of cutting the cord feels so impossible. But it's not impossible. It's hard, yes, but it's possible. And it all begins by noticing the pattern, writing it down, observing, understanding that there is an emotional sequence that repeats itself. You can use a simple 3-step model to begin unconditioning this toxic attachment. First, record what happens before, during, and after each interaction with your child. What are the triggers? How do you feel? What does he say? Second, observe the moments of relief. When you feel like now everything is fine, is it real? Or just a pause between two painful moments? Third, write a phrase that marks your emotional clarity. Something like, "I can love," without allowing myself to be hurt. That sentence will be your anchor, your internal protection when the pattern tries to repeat itself. A woman told me, "I started noticing that my son's compliments always came after a criticism. He'd say I was wonderful, only after saying I was in the way. And that's when I saw it wasn't affection, it was control." Maybe you are caught in that cycle too. Maybe the love you feel has turned into a bond of fear, guilt, and fragile hope. But you don't have to stay there. You can learn to tell the difference between love that nourishes and love that wounds. And yes, you can move forward with affection in your heart, but with respect for yourself. Because love that requires your pain to exist is not love. It's a trap, and you deserve to break free from it. With courage, with clarity, and with a new kind of affection. The one that begins in you, for you, by you. Few pains are as silent as the fear of aging alone. That fear doesn't scream. It whispers late at night when the house is quiet. It creeps into the thoughts you try to push away. What if I get sick? Who will take care of me? Will my child abandon me? This is the fear many narcissistic children use as a bargaining chip. They don't always say it directly. Sometimes it's just a casual phrase. "Don't say I didn't warn you. You'll need me one day. Think twice before you push me away." These phrases carry a threat disguised as concern. They don't speak of love. They speak of control. And they work because they strike right at the most vulnerable point in a parent's heart. The need to feel safe, supported, protected. But here's a hard and liberating truth. Real love cares without conditions. Real love doesn't use fear as leverage. Real love doesn't turn a parent's old age into a tool for obedience. What many parents don't realize is that by accepting this kind of blackmail, they give up their emotional freedom. They begin to walk on eggshells trying to please, trying not to upset, trying to keep close someone who only shows up when they sense you're vulnerable. And the blackmail gets more sophisticated. Sometimes it comes as conditional help. If you want me to come over, stop complaining. If you want my support, don't bring that up. Other times it's intentional absence. The child distances themselves and only returns when you're scared enough to accept anything, even humiliation. But taking care of your peace today is the best preparation for tomorrow. Because what sustains you emotionally is not the presence of someone who controls you. It's the clarity of who you are. It's the ability to say enough without guilt. It's the strength to protect yourself even if that means facing some loneliness at first. Because there's a profound difference between being alone and being surrounded by those who don't truly love you. You can start now with a simple exercise. An emotional checklist to identify blackmail disguised as concern. Ask yourself, does this phrase make me feel fear or safety? Does what my child is saying bring us closer or make me feel dependent? Do I feel stronger or weaker after this conversation? Is this care or control? These questions, when asked with honesty, reveal patterns that have been hidden for years. More importantly, they give you back the power of choice. Because blackmail only works when the victim feels like they have no options. And you do have options. You always have. One woman told me, "I realized I was living like a hostage to a son who never saw me as a person. He treated me like a service, an obligation, and I accepted it, out of fear. Today I'm still afraid, but I also have courage. That courage doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms the pain into movement. Movement toward healthy distance, movement toward rebuilding, movement toward liberation. You don't need anyone's approval to protect yourself, nor do you need to justify your decision to live with dignity. Old age should never be used as blackmail. It should be honored with true love, and if that love doesn't come from others, let it begin with you, because the most powerful care is the one you learn to give yourself, without fear, without debt, without conditions. There comes a moment when the silence inside the house becomes heavier than any word left unspoken. It's that moment when you realize that, even though you are physically present, you've emotionally ceased to exist in your child's life. They see you, but don't truly see you. They speak to you, but don't hear you. They coexist, but don't connect. This is the pain of emotional invisibility, a pain that doesn't come from shouting, but from a lack of recognition. You feel like a piece of furniture in the house, always there, always useful, but never noticed. never remembered as someone who also feels, who also thinks, who also needs affection. Many parents faced with this reality fall into a common pattern: self-erasure. They begin to say things like, "I don't want to bother him. It's better to let it go. He has his own problems." But behind that humility lies a deep wound, the wound of someone who learned to shrink themselves in order to keep the relationship alive. But a bond that only survives when you disappear as an individual is not a bond. It's emotional submission, and it's not uncommon for parents to mistake the absence of conflict for peace. But when that absence comes with coldness, distance, and silence, it is not harmony, it's silencing. And silencing your own pain, your own existence, is too high a price to pay for false connection. That's why the process of beginning again starts with a simple, yet deeply symbolic, active self-listening. Stand in front of the mirror. Look at yourself, not with judgment, not with pity, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And allow yourself to answer, out loud, without censorship, without fear. Name your emotion. This practice, done daily, begins to rebuild something that may have been lost for years: your presence for yourself. One mother told me, "The day I called myself by my name in the mirror and cried for me was the day I was reborn. For the first time, I felt compassion for myself, the same way I've always felt for others." And that changed everything, because she stopped waiting for recognition from others and began to recognize herself from within. This is the beginning of a new story, a story where you no longer have to be strong all the time, where you can be seen, heard, and cared for by yourself, where self-love is not vanity, but emotional survival. You are still here, and that is enough to start again. You still feel, you still hope, you still dream, and even if others have forgotten you, you can decide that you will not forget yourself anymore, because your existence deserves to be felt, remembered, and embraced by you, for you, always. After so many years trying to maintain a bond, you might now be asking yourself, who am I without this role? The truth is that many parents lose themselves in the act of caring, providing, protecting, and when that role is rejected by their child, the emptiness feels unbearable. But that emptiness can be a new beginning. The hidden fear for many is this: without my child, who am I? And that question hurts, because it reveals the depth of the devotion you've poured into your life. You gave so much of yourself that now it feels like nothing is left but the pain. But something remains. You, even if hidden, hurt, or asleep, you are still there. And that you can be rebuilt, not from nothing, but from the essence that has always existed. And for that, I want to share 3 emotional paths that may help in this new beginning. The first path is reconnecting with your personal story, not the story as a parent, but as a person. Who were you before you were defined only by caring for your children? What dreams were left behind? What interests, friendships, or hobbies were abandoned? Recovering parts of yourself that were forgotten is an act of healing. You can begin by listing joyful, simple memories that belong to you and don't involve your children. This is not selfishness. It's reclaiming your identity. The second path is creating new emotional bonds. Often, the pain of rejection makes us believe that no one else will ever see us. But there are people willing to listen, to care, to respect, even if they don't share your blood. It may happen in a support group, in a rekindled old friendship, in a new spiritual or community connection. Emotional connection doesn't die with a child's distance. It can be cultivated, even in maturity, with new roots. The third path is building a post-breakup emotional map. Literally, draw a circle with your name in the center and start mapping. Who are the people around you? Who listens to you? Who ignores you? Who values you? Who uses you? Seeing this on paper helps reveal truths that the heart often avoids, and it helps you make more conscious decisions. Who deserves to be closer? Who needs to be kept at a healthy distance? A mother once told me, when I stopped trying to understand why my son mistreated me and started caring for myself the way I would care for a friend, my life began to return. That's the power of starting over. It doesn't require full answers. It requires movement, even if slow, even if small, even if filled with fear. You can love a child and still move on without them. That doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you a whole human being who chose to live with dignity. Starting over doesn't erase the past, but it writes a new chapter, where you are the protagonist of your own piece, where love doesn't hurt, where silence doesn't weigh you down, where guilt no longer rules. There's still time to find joy in small things, to laugh with lightness, to sleep in peace, to feel that you matter, even if your child doesn't see it, because you do matter. And starting over right now may be the greatest act of love you've ever given to yourself.